The wind, a raw-edged knife, pared the high plains down to bone and dust. It had a voice, that wind, a mournful keen that spoke of endings and long roads. Under a sky the color of a fading bruise, a rider moved, a solitary silhouette. Jonah! He swayed with the tired rhythm of his horse, a gaunt gelding. Strapped to his chest, bundled tight, was a small, fretful life. A child. Too young for such a journey. Dust caked his worn duster, gritted in his teeth. Each breath the infant took was a small miracle, each whimper a fresh stab of guilt. He'd made promises, whispered them above a fresh grave, promises he was failing. The canteen was near empty. But it was the milk, or lack thereof, that gnawed at him. The child's cries were weaker now, a thin, despairing sound. He was failing. Then, a smudge on the horizon. Smoke. Hope, a dangerous sensation, flickered. He nudged the gelding forward. Hours later, the smudge resolved into a cabin. Small, dug into the earth, a sod roof. A curl of smoke from a mud brick chimney. A rough-hewn fence enclosed a patch of churned earth. He saw her then. A woman, her back to him, splitting wood with practiced economy. She wore a faded, patched dress, her hair pulled back tight. Strong. Jonah reined in. He slid from the saddle, legs stiff, the bundled child a heavy weight. The woman hadn't turned. He cleared his throat. Her axe stilled. She lowered it slowly before turning. Her face was weathered, her eyes a pale, watchful blue. They held no welcome. "Don't get many visitors," she said, her voice low, rough. "Not looking for a visit," Jonah said, his voice hoarse. He shifted the bundle. "My child needs milk. We're out." He hated the begging tone. Her gaze flickered to the bundle, then back to his face, hard. Silence stretched. The wind picked at his duster. The baby let out a tiny, mewling cry. "Got no cow," she stated flatly. "Goat, then? Anything?" His voice cracked. Her eyes seemed to look right through him. "Ain't got goat milk to spare for strangers," she said, but there was a fractional softening. Jonah's shoulders sagged. "Understand?" He turned to go. "Wait," he stopped, turned back. She was looking at the bundle again, a strange expression on her face. Pain and something else. "Let me see the child," she said. He hesitated. But the baby whimpered again. Slowly, he walked towards her, fumbling with the wrappings, revealing the tiny, red, pinched face of the infant. The child was small. Sarah, for he would learn her name was Sarah, looked at the baby, and for a moment, the harshness in her face dissolved, replaced by a profound, aching sorrow. Resolve hardened her features again. "You ain't fed this child proper in days," not an accusation, just a fact. "Tried," he rasped. "Nothing left," she nodded curtly. "Give him here." Before he could react, she reached out. Her hands, calloused and capable, were surprisingly gentle as she took the infant. The baby quieted slightly. Sarah looked at Jonah. "I got no milk to give you, mister," she said, her voice softer now, but firm. "Not in a bottle. Not from a goat." Jonah felt a cold dread. "Then what?" But Sarah turned, cradling the infant, and walked towards the cabin door. She paused. But a child needs to eat. She didn't look back. She opened the door and disappeared inside, leaving Jonah standing alone, confusion and a tiny spark of hope warring within him. He waited. The sun dipped lower. What was she doing? He should leave. But his feet were rooted. The child was in there. Finally, the door creaked open. Sarah stood in the dim doorway. She said nothing, just looked at him. Then she stepped aside. He walked into the small, one-room cabin. Clean, sparse. A rough table, 2 chairs, a stone hearth where a small fire now crackled. And Sarah, sitting in a rocker, the infant nestled at her breast. His breath caught. She was feeding the child herself. Her head was bowed, her expression hidden. The scene was so intimate, so profoundly maternal, it struck Jonah with the force of a physical blow. He felt like an intruder. He looked away, a flush creeping up his neck. He'd asked for milk. He hadn't expected this. This quiet, selfless act of mercy. More than he deserved. The only sound was the fire and the soft, contented sigh of the baby. Jonah stood awkwardly, hat in hand, watching a woman save his child's life, not with what she had, but with who she was. The wind howled outside, but in here, for a moment, there was a fragile peace. The baby, sated, slept in a makeshift cradle Sarah had fashioned from a crate. Jonah had watched her, the rhythmic rock of her chair, the gentle hum as she'd held the child, and a feeling he couldn't name had tightened his own. Gratitude, and something more. Awe. And shame. He sat at the small table, nursing bitter chicory brew. The silence was thick, charged. "He'll need more," Sarah said finally, her gaze on the infant. Practical, yet the act itself had been pure sentiment. "I know," Jonah replied. "I got nothing to pay you with, didn't ask for pay," she said, turning her pale eyes on him. Child was hungry, simple as that. The world Jonah knew didn't operate on such kindness. "I can work," he offered, desperate to repay her. "Fix that fence." Chop wood. Sarah considered him. He was a stranger, haunted, with a child of mysterious origins. He knew what she must be thinking. "Fence is always in need of mending," she said after a moment. "And winter's coming. Woodpiles low, not quite an acceptance, but enough. I'll start at first light." He slept on the dirt floor near the hearth, saddle blanket his covering. He lay awake, listening to the wind, the soft breathing of the child, the creak of the cabin. He thought of the road behind him, littered with regret. He thought of the promise to protect this child. He was failing. But tonight, the child was safe. Federation warm. Because of her. In the morning, the routine established itself without words. Sarah up before dawn, tending the fire. Jonah took his chicory outside. He surveyed the fence line. Old, weathered, sagging. A testament to her stubborn will. He found an old axe, tools in a lean-to. He set to work, the physical labor a welcome distraction. He split wood, mended fence. Sarah worked nearby in her small garden, her movements mirroring his in their quiet diligence. They rarely spoke. Need more wire or water buckets by the wealth a silent understanding grew. He learned to read her expressions. She accepted his presence, his labor, his silences. The baby became the center of their world. Jonah watched Sarah care for the infant, talking in soft, low tones. She bathed him, her touch gentle, sure. She fed him, that intimate act still a source of wonder and a dull ache in Jonah's chest. He thought of Mary, the child's mother, her face a blurred image. He hadn't saved her. He had to save her son. One evening, Sarah rocked the baby by the fire. "He needs a name." Jonah flinched. To name him was to make him real, to acknowledge his responsibility, the loss. His mother, she didn't get the chance, he said, voice a whisper. Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a deep, knowing sadness. "My husband, Thomas, always wanted a son. We weren't blessed." Her voice quiet, laden with old grief. Jonah looked at her, seeing the lines of sorrow, the resilience born from enduring pain. "Samuel," she said softly, looking at the baby. "It means God has heard." Jonah looked at the child. Samuel. It felt right. A name with a sliver of hope. "Samuel," he repeated. He looked at Sarah, a silent gratitude passing between them. Days turned into weeks. The woodpile grew. The fence stood straighter. Jonah felt a measure of peace, fragile, tentative. One afternoon, a rider approached. Well-dressed, confident, a rifle in his scabbard. Jonah tensed. He recognized the arrogance, the possessive eyes. Sarah came to the door, her face impassive. "Afternoon, Mrs. Miller," the man said, voice smooth, edged with steel. "Blackwood," Sarah's voice was flat. "Thought I'd check on my neighbor." His gaze lingered on her, then shifted to Jonah, cold and appraising. "See you got help." "He's just passing through," Sarah said, clipped. Blackwood smiled, humorless. "This land, hard for a woman alone, Mrs. Miller." "Always happy to discuss a fair price, not selling." "Blackwood," Sarah said, firm. This was Thomas's land. "It's my land now." Blackwood's smile tightened. "Everything has a price. Some prices are paid differently." His gaze flicked to Samuel, asleep inside, then back to Sarah. A veiled threat. Jonah felt cold anger, an old instinct. He gripped the axe handle, knuckles white. Blackwood noticed. His eyes narrowed on Jonah. "Best be careful who you associate with, Mrs. Miller. Drifters carry trouble." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Just a friendly visit." He rode away, leaving unease. Sarah watched him go, jaw tight. Jonah looked at her, then at the sleeping child. The fragile piece shattered. Trouble had found them. The visit from Silas Blackwood cast a long shadow. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Jonah watched the horizon more, his hand near the axe. Sarah showed no outward fear, her routine unchanged, her resilience a silent rebuke. But Jonah saw the subtle signs, her gaze lingering on Samuel, the slight tightening of her lips. He worked harder, reinforcing the cabin, digging a deeper well. Each task an act of defiance. He was no longer just working for his keep, he was working to protect what was becoming, impossibly, a home. One evening, Sarah spoke of Thomas. They sat outside, Samuel gurgling at their feet. "Thomas built this place," she said, voice soft. "Our piece of heaven." She paused. "He was a good man. Strong. Kind." Jonah listened. "Blackwood wanted this land even then," she continued, voice hardening. "Said the creek was his. Thomas told him no." A shadow crossed her face. "An accident. Hunting accident, they called it. Found him by the creek." Her voice caught. "Sheriff in redemption, enjoys Blackwood's hospitality." Case closed. Jonah's jaw clenched. He knew men like Blackwood, who took what they wanted. He'd known them. Been one. "He won't get this place," Jonah said, voice low, resolute. Sarah looked at him, her pale eyes searching his face. "Why, Jonah?" she asked quietly. "This ain't your fight." He looked at Samuel, asleep. Thought of Mary's last plea. Thought of the emptiness that was slowly, tentatively, filling. "Maybe it is," he said. "Maybe I'm tired of running from fights." He didn't elaborate on the men he'd killed, the life he'd led. Sarah seemed to understand. A fragile trust had taken root, nurtured by shared labor, the child's vulnerability, unspoken acknowledgement of past sorrows. They moved in a comfortable rhythm. He'd find fresh water, she'd find the woodbox full. Samuel thrived. He'd gurgle when Jonah lifted him, his small hands clutching Jonah's beard. He'd snuggle contentedly against Sarah. He was the anchor, the embodiment of a future worth fighting for. One day, Jonah found old horseshoes. He spent the afternoon sharpening them. That evening, he presented them to Sarah. "For your horse," he said, avoiding her gaze. "If you ever need to, ride out fast." Her eyes met his. She understood. "Thank you, Jonah," she said, her fingers brushing his. A brief contact, a jolt through him. The next day, 2 of Blackwood's men rode up. They didn't dismount, expression smug. One let his horse trample Sarah's garden. "Boss says to remind you, Mrs. Miller," the man sneered. "His offer still stands. Be a shame if something unfortunate happened." Jonah, repairing a wagon wheel, straightened slowly. His face a mask, eyes cold. He picked up a heavy wrench. Sarah stepped out, Samuel on her hip. Face pale, voice steady. "Tell Blackwood I'm not interested." "And keep his dogs off my land," the man chuckled nastily. "Brave words, lady." For someone all alone, his eyes flicked towards Jonah, then Samuel. Real shame about that fire over at the Henderson place. Spread so fast, Jonah took a step forward. The wrench felt like an extension of his arm. "I think," Jonah said, his voice quiet, laced with menace, "you've said your piece. Time to go." The two men exchanged a look. The drifter wasn't supposed to be a factor. But there was something in his eyes, a deadly calm, that gave them pause. The burly man spat. "You'll regret this, drifter. Both of you." They wheeled their horses and galloped away. Sarah let out a shaky breath, arm tightening around Samuel. She looked at Jonah, fear and gratitude in her eyes. He hadn't raised his voice, but the message was clear. He was no longer just a passing drifter. He was a protector. And for the first time, Sarah didn't feel quite so alone. The bond had solidified. They were a unit. Jonah knew with chilling certainty that the violence he had tried to outrun was about to catch up. This time, he wouldn't be running. This time, he had something to stand for. The days that followed were taut. Every shadow seemed menacing, every distant sound a potential threat. Jonah slept little, wrench near, scanning the horizon. He knew Blackwood would return. Men like him didn't tolerate defiance. Sarah, too, was on edge, though she tried to hide it. She kept Thomas's old shotgun loaded near the door. Unreliable, but something. Jonah saw her practicing, clumsy but determined. The quiet moments with Samuel became precious. Jonah whispered stories to the child, tales his own mother had told him. Samuel's tiny fingers curling around his thumb anchored him to the present, to the future he now fought for. One evening, a storm gathered. Jonah sat with Sarah by the fire, Samuel asleep. The wind howled. "They'll be back," Sarah said. "I know," Jonah replied. He looked into the flames, seeing flickering images of his past. Burning homesteads, faces in fear, the taste of blood. "I used to be good at trouble," he said, voice low. Too good. Sarah waited. "I rode with a man named Quantrill," he continued, the name ash in his mouth. "During the war. And after. We weren't soldiers. We were reapers." He saw understanding, horror, in her eyes, but she didn't recoil. "We burned, looted, killed. For profit, vengeance, hell of it." His voice flat, hands clenched. "Mary." Samuel's mother, caught in the crossfire. "A town we visited." He closed his eyes. "I pulled her from a burning building. Too late for her family. She saw something in me that wasn't there." His gaze haunted. "She died birthing Samuel. Fever took her. Made me promise to take him away. Give him a life I never had." Silence. He expected disgust, condemnation. Sarah reached out, her hand covering his. Warm, steady. "That was then, Jonah," she said softly. "This is now. You're not that man anymore." He searched her face. "Only compassion, empathy." "How can you know that?" he whispered. "I see how you are with Samuel," she said. "I see how you look at this land, this home. That man you speak of, he wouldn't care. He wouldn't protect." Her words, a fragile absolution. The storm broke, rain lashing, wind screaming. Nature mirroring the violence to come. They came just before dawn, under the dying storm. Jonah heard them first, muffled hooves, creak of leather. Instantly awake, wrench in hand. "They're here," he whispered urgently. Sarah reached for the shotgun, face pale, resolute. "Samuel," she breathed. "Keep him quiet. Stay low," Jonah commanded. He peered through a shutter crack. 5 riders. Blackwood among them. The first shot shattered the quiet, splintering the shutter. He ducked, pulling Sarah down. "Stay away from the windows." Blackwood's voice boomed. "Miller. Drifter. Last chance." Come out, or we burn you out. Jonah looked at Sarah. Fear in her eyes, jaw set. There's a root cellar, Sarah whispered, pointing to a trap door. Small. Might give us cover good, Jonah said. Get Samuel. Get in there. Don't come out, no matter what about you, she asked, voice trembling. I'll keep them busy, he said grimly. He met her gaze, a silent farewell. She nodded, tears welling, but scooped up Samuel and scrambled towards the trap door. Jonah waited until she was safe. He had to draw them away. He kicked open the back door, fired the shotgun into the air, a defiant roar. Then he ran, zigzagging towards the barn. Shots followed, thudding into the earth. Blackwood shouted orders. Jonah reached the barn, ducking inside. No gun, only the wrench and his wits. But he had a reason to fight. A reason to live. He heard them dismounting, spreading out. He was trapped. But not beaten. He thought of Sarah, Samuel, hidden. Mary's plea. He would not fail them. The violence he tried to bury was now his only shield. But this time, it was different. For them. He took a deep breath. Old instinct surged. He was a protector. He would hold the line. The barn was shadows and forgotten tools. Jonah moved like a ghost, silent on the packed earth. He heard Blackwood's men, confident, careless. He found an old pitchfork, tines rusted but sharp. He crouched behind hay bales, listening. The first man entered cautiously, rifle ready. Jonah waited, then moved, swift. The wrench connected with the man's skull. A thud, and he crumpled. One down. Jonah dragged the body deeper, taking the rifle, an old Spencer, loaded. He was a hunter. Another man approached, calling out. Jed? You in here? Jonah let him come closer. Framed in the doorway, Jonah fired. The Spencer bucked. The man cried out, clutching his leg, down. He's in the barn, someone shouted. Flush him out. More shots peppered the barn. Jonah knew he couldn't stay. They'd burn it. He had to take the fight to them, get to Blackwood. A flicker of movement at the side door. Jonah fired. The man yelped, scrambled back. Suddenly, a shotgun blast, closer than expected. Sarah. Out of the cellar, near the cabin, Thomas's shotgun in her hands. Reloaded. She fired again at one of Blackwood's men aiming at the barn. The man ducked, cursing. Sarah's courage bought Jonah his opening. He burst from the barn, firing the Spencer, running low, using scattered woodpiles for cover. Blackwood's remaining men, caught between Jonah and Sarah, were confused. One broke and ran. Another raised his hands as Jonah advanced. That left Blackwood. Near his horse, face contorted in fury. He raised his pistol at Jonah. You damn drifter! I'll kill you myself. Jonah dived behind a wagon as Blackwood fired, the bullet thudding into wood. Out of rounds for the Spencer. He tossed it, drawing the wrench. He charged, a primal roar. Blackwood fired again, wildly. The bullet tugged Jonah's sleeve. Jonah closed the distance, swung the wrench, connecting with Blackwood's gun hand. The pistol clattered. Blackwood howled, clutching shattered fingers. Jonah stood over him, wrench raised, chest heaving. He could end it. The old instinct screamed. But he saw Sarah, watching, Samuel in her arms. Fear in her eyes, not of Blackwood, but of him. He lowered the wrench slowly. It's over, Blackwood, Jonah said, voice ragged. Get off this land. Don't come back. Blackwood stared, hatred and pain in his eyes. Beaten. He scrambled to his horse, mounted, humiliated, and rode away. The remaining henchmen followed. Silence descended. Gunpowder hung heavy. Jonah dropped the wrench, hands trembling. Sarah rushed to his side. "Jonah? Are you hurt?" He shook his head. He looked at the carnage. Violence, necessary, but bitter. He was tired. So tired of fighting. Sarah's touch was gentle. "It's done," she said softly. "You saved us." He looked at her, at Samuel. He hadn't run. He had stood his ground. Protected them. Faced his past, choosing a different path. Later, after the injured man was sent off, after the body in the barn dealt with, they sat on the porch. Sunset painted the sky. The land, their land, peaceful. Samuel slept. A fragile peace, bought with blood and fear. Jonah looked at Sarah, her profile soft in twilight. "You think he'll be back?" Sarah shook her head. "Not Blackwood. He knows what he'd face." She turned, a small, tentative smile. "This is our home, Jonah. We defended it, our home." The words resonated. He had come broken, begging. Found more than sustenance. Found a reason. A family. He reached out, his hand covering hers on the porch rail. A simple touch, speaking of shared hardship, unspoken understanding, a future they might dare build. The wind whispered, no longer mournful, but a gentle sigh. Scars would remain. But tonight, under starlit sky, there was hope. Quiet, resilient, fragile as a newborn's breath, strong enough to build a life upon. Jonah looked at Samuel, then at Sarah. He was no longer running. He was home.